Welcome to Newsbeacon, your trusted source for breaking headlines, global insights, and sharp analysis from around the world. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. The news hit like a shockwave, reverberating not just through the aviation industry, but across the entire American economy. Overnight, headlines blared the unthinkable. Boeing, one of the world's most iconic manufacturers, was halting all U.S. production. Boeing, a symbol of U.S. innovation and a cornerstone of American engineering, has long stood as a testament to the nation's industrial might. Now, for the first time in generations, its U.S. production lines are grinding to a halt, leaving factories eerily silent and communities on edge. The decision threatens not just thousands of jobs, but the very stability of entire regions that have depended on Boeing for decades. Families, small businesses, and local economies are bracing for impact. For decades, Boeing has been a source of national pride and economic strength, building everything from commercial airliners to cutting-edge defense technology. Its legacy is woven into the fabric of American progress. Now, this drastic move signals a crisis with deep roots, one that's been building for years beneath the surface. Former President Trump, whose aggressive trade policies and tariffs fueled much of this turmoil, broke his silence with a furious social media outburst. He lashed out at critics, blamed foreign competitors, and fiercely defended his administration's actions. But his response only deepened the panic, sending shockwaves through financial markets and highlighting the chaos unleashed by the ongoing trade war he started. Investors scrambled and uncertainty spread. This shutdown is more than a business decision. It's the culmination of years of escalating economic conflict, policy missteps, and mounting global competition. The trade war's ripple effects have finally reached the heart of American industry. The fallout will ripple for years, impacting not only workers and investors, but also America's global reputation as a leader in aerospace and manufacturing. The world is watching, and confidence is shaken. From highly skilled engineers in Seattle to assembly line workers in South Carolina, livelihoods are suddenly at risk. The uncertainty is palpable, and the stakes couldn't be higher. These are high-skilled jobs supporting entire communities. Schools, restaurants, and local shops all depend on Boeing's presence. Now, with paychecks in jeopardy, families face an uncertain and anxious future. The central question remains: how did America's industrial champion, once the envy of the world, end up forced to shut its doors at home? The answer is complex, and the consequences are only beginning to unfold. Boeing's crisis didn't happen overnight. It was the result of a series of escalating events that began with President Trump's aggressive trade war with China. The seeds of this crisis were planted years before, but it was the sudden shift in U.S. trade policy that truly set things in motion. In 2018, the Trump administration imposed massive tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods. The goal was to punish China for what the administration called unfair trade practices and to bring manufacturing jobs back to the U.S. It was a bold move, one that made headlines around the world and signaled a new era in U.S.-China relations. But in today's globalized economy, supply chains are international and deeply interconnected. Products are rarely made in just one country. Instead, parts and materials cross borders multiple times before reaching consumers. When tariffs were slapped on Chinese imports, American companies felt the pain too. Costs for raw materials and components soared, squeezing profit margins and creating widespread uncertainty for businesses large and small. The policy, which was meant to protect U.S. industry and workers, instead exposed them to severe harm. Many factories struggled to absorb the higher costs, and some were forced to shut down or lay off workers. The trade war quickly became a tit-for-tat conflict, with each side imposing new tariffs in response to the other. Tensions escalated, and there was no clear end in sight, leaving businesses and investors on edge. China didn't back down. Instead, it retaliated by targeting key American sectors like agriculture, technology, and aviation. American farmers, manufacturers, and exporters suddenly found themselves shut out of one of their biggest markets. U.S. companies with deep ties to China, like Boeing, were caught in the crossfire. Boeing relied heavily on Chinese customers and suppliers, making it especially vulnerable to the fallout. Rather than reviving American manufacturing, the tariffs destabilized it. Production lines slowed or stopped, and uncertainty made it difficult for companies to plan for the future. Costs rose for businesses and consumers alike, as higher tariffs were passed down the supply chain. Meanwhile, China's retaliation struck at the heart of U.S. exports, from airplanes to soybeans, deepening the economic pain. Boeing's current crisis is a direct result of this policy gamble gone wrong. The company, once a symbol of American industrial strength, now faces grounded planes, lost orders, and a workforce in turmoil. The first shot in the trade war set off a chain reaction. Grounded planes, shuttered factories, and a national emergency that continues to ripple through the American economy today. The consequences of these decisions are still being felt, reminding us that in a global economy, no country acts in isolation. China's response to escalating trade tensions was swift, decisive, and unmistakably targeted. Within days, state-owned airlines across China abruptly halted all new Boeing orders, sending shockwaves through the global aviation industry. This move wasn't just about business or contracts. It was a calculated political weapon aimed directly at America's largest manufacturing exporter and a symbol of U.S. industrial might. China is the world's fastest-growing aviation market, with millions of new travelers each year and a booming demand for aircraft. Losing access to this market is nothing short of a strategic disaster for Boeing. Almost overnight, billions in future revenue vanished from Boeing's books, while European rival Airbus gained a massive competitive advantage, quickly filling the void left by Boeing's absence. Boeing's carefully planned production schedules were thrown into chaos. Unfinished planes began piling up in storage, and assembly lines slowed to a crawl as orders dried up. The freeze-out didn't just hurt Boeing, it sent shockwaves through the entire U.S. aerospace supply chain, threatening the livelihoods of thousands of workers at smaller American companies that depend on Boeing contracts. China's move exposed just how vulnerable American firms are in a globalized world, where a single political decision can disrupt entire industries and threaten jobs far beyond the factory floor. For decades, Boeing's success depended on robust international sales, with China as a cornerstone of its global strategy. Now that vital link was suddenly and brutally severed. The trade war had transformed what was once a mutually beneficial commercial relationship into a high-stakes geopolitical battleground, with Boeing caught in the crossfire. Inside Boeing, executives and workers alike faced mounting uncertainty and stress, grappling with consequences they had never anticipated and could not control. China's calculated retaliation didn't just hurt business, it created intense political pressure in Washington as lawmakers scrambled to respond to the crisis and protect American jobs. The result? An American industrial giant, once a symbol of national pride and innovation, brought to its knees by forces far beyond its control, a stark reminder of the risks in today's interconnected world. The trade war wasn't Boeing's only problem. The company was already reeling from 2 fatal 737 MAX crashes, exposing design flaws and a culture that put profits over safety. The global grounding of the MAX shattered public trust and cost billions. Years of management focus on stock prices and cost-cutting eroded Boeing's engineering-first legacy. Production issues and quality lapses plagued other programs, like the 787 Dreamliner. These self-inflicted wounds left Boeing weak and unprepared for external shocks. The Chinese freeze-out hit a company already struggling to recover. Boeing's internal failures made it vulnerable. When the trade war struck, it couldn't withstand the blow. It's a lesson resilience depends on both internal health and the external environment. As Boeing faltered, Airbus soared. The trade war handed Airbus a golden opportunity. Locked out of China, Boeing watched as its rivals signed massive deals. China, once careful to balance orders, now favored Airbus as a political statement. Airbus quickly expanded its market share, securing dominance in the world's top aviation growth market. Meanwhile, China's own Comac is developing the C919, aiming to compete with both Boeing and Airbus. The trade dispute has only accelerated China's push for self-sufficiency in aviation. Boeing's loss became Airbus's gain, reshaping the industry's balance of power. U.S. policy, meant to help American companies, ended up strengthening their biggest competitor. Boeing's shutdown triggered a domino effect across the U.S. economy. Thousands of suppliers, from Ohio to Arizona, lost their biggest customer. Layoffs and cutbacks followed. Local economies built around Boeing plants faced sudden decline, hurting small businesses and communities. The blow to U.S. manufacturing deepened a decades-long struggle for middle-class prosperity. On Wall Street, Boeing's stock plummeted, erasing billions in value and shaking investor confidence. The crisis damaged America's reputation as a reliable trading partner and advanced manufacturer. Other countries may now diversify away from U.S. supply chains, further weakening American influence. The Boeing crisis is a stark reminder: economic strength depends on stability and strategic foresight. Economists and trade experts warned from the start. Trump's tariff war was a blunt, counterproductive tool. Instead of reducing the trade deficit or bringing jobs home, it backfired, inflicting pain on U.S. consumers and manufacturers. Boeing's crisis is the most vivid example of this failed strategy. Analysts criticized the lack of a coherent plan and the alienation of key allies. A smarter approach would have built coalitions to pressure China on real issues. Instead, the U.S. fought alone, leaving companies like Boeing exposed to retaliation. China didn't need to match tariffs. It simply stopped buying American products. The fallout shows trade policy requires nuance and strategy, not just confrontation. Experts now call for a complete reevaluation, shifting from unilateral action to multilateral cooperation. The fate of major U.S. companies depends on a more sensible approach to global trade. The Boeing crisis is more than economics. It's a pawn in the US-China geopolitical chess match. China's freeze-out was a calculated move to pressure Washington, turning Boeing into a hostage in a larger power struggle. Multinational corporations now face the risk of being caught between government policy and global markets. Boeing had no good options: speak out and seem unpatriotic, or stay silent and absorb losses. The Trump administration's aggressive stance now looks like a strategic miscalculation. The conflict shows that in today's world, business and geopolitics are inseparable. Even the most powerful corporations are vulnerable to decisions made in Washington and Beijing. With Boeing's U.S. production lines idle, the future is uncertain. The company's fate depends on resolving a trade war beyond its control. Some say China can't lock out Boeing forever, but there's no guarantee the freeze will end soon. For now, Boeing waits, its silence reflecting its precarious position. For the U.S., this crisis is a wake-up call. Trade policy needs a strategic reset. The lesson trade wars have no easy winners, and internal corporate health is crucial. Boeing's own failures made it more vulnerable to external shocks. Rebuilding will require both policy change and a cultural transformation inside Boeing. What happens next will define the future of American manufacturing. The world is watching to see if the U.S. can restore stability to its most important industries.